Fania has taught restorative justice at San Francisco's New College Law School and Indigenous Peacemaking at Eastern Mennonite University Center for Justice and Peacebuilding. Fania also serves as counsel to the International Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers. Her honors include the Ubuntu Service of Humanity Award, the Maloney Award recognizing exceptional contributions in youth-based restorative justice, and World Trust Healing Justice Award. She was recently named by the Los Angeles Times as a new civil rights leader of the 21st century. I met Fania in 2014 when she was chosen to be the recipient of our Center's Peace Through Education Award, which she received as a result of her work with RJOY, Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. She was an obvious choice for our keynote address this year, and lucky for us, she happened to be available. So please welcome Fania Davis.
Thank you so much, Marguerite. So welcome again to the 5th annual Creating Peaceful Schools Conference. I just want to open by honoring the ancestors of this land, the Pomo and the Ohlone people. There is so much that we can learn about peacemaking and peace building from the ancestors of this land, and indeed from our ancestors. I want to start my remarks by greeting you in the South African way, the Zulu way. Sawubona. Sawubona. And that is a greeting that is used when I see you in the marketplace. When I greet you, I'll say, Sawubona. I see you. When I'm on a dusty road and you pass, Sawubona. I see you. This is the way they say hello. I see you, meaning I see your spirit. I see your authentic self. I see the gift that you are to the world. Let me tell you just a little bit about how I came to do this work, restorative justice in schools. It really goes back to my own childhood in Birmingham, Alabama. Actually, we called it Birmingham, Alabama. So I was raised in the South during a time when apartheid basically ruled in the South, but also during the time when there was an incredible movement that was rising up to resist it. I lived atop Dynamite Hill. That was really the name of my neighborhood. And you know, it only occurred to me when I was over 60, the sort of synchronicity of being born in Birmingham, Alabama, and living atop Dynamite Hill. And it was called Birmingham because of the frequency of bombings of churches, of individuals' homes who were active in the civil rights movement. Many people know about the Birmingham Sunday School bombing, right? That was one of so many. Our church was bombed just down the hill from me. The house of the lawyer just across the street from our church was bombed because he represented Arthur E. Lucy, who was integrating University of Alabama. Houses all around us in our neighborhood were bombed. We were fortunate our home was never bombed. But houses in our neighborhood were bombed because we were pushing the color line. Black families were moving into a previously all-white area. So we awakened very often in the morning to the sounds of bombings. And it was really, I think, the loss of my two friends in the Birmingham Sunday School bombing on September 15, 1963, that created this irreversible commitment in me, this deep yearning, this burning desire to be a powerful agent for social transformation. It sort of put me on the path of a warrior for social justice. So when I left the South, going from the civil rights movement, I kind of went into a very extreme black nationalist phase. I was angry at white people. I wouldn't even want white people to come to my house. I remember my brother had been in the National Guard, and during the holiday, he brought home a friend from the National Guard who was white. This was in the 60s, the early 60s. And I kind of blocked the doorway. I said, he can't come in this house. I was so angry at white people at that time. So I was involved in Black nationalist movements. After that, I became involved in the Black Panther Party. I became involved in the socialist movement, in the anti-imperialist movement, the anti-racist movements, the anti-apartheid movements, the anti-capitalist movements, the anti-chauvinism, male chauvinism movement. And note that I'm saying a lot of anti. I was very involved in fighting against racism, against sexism, against imperialism, against capitalism. And then I became a trial lawyer fighting against racism in the courts. And after almost 30 years of being this outraged activist, this trial lawyer who had to cultivate hyper-rationalist and hyper-masculinist and belligerent ways of being in order to be successful, I became burnt out, essentially. I got out of balance. And I knew through dreams and other synchronistic experiences that I was being called to bring more spiritual energies into my life. I was being called to bring more healing energies into my life. I was being called to bring more water into my life to balance the fire. More feminine energies to balance the hyper-masculinist energies. And sure, I was being invited to bring healing into my life. And so that set me on a path of finding mentors who could help me. That led me to join the program that was mentioned earlier, the Indigenous Knowledge PhD program, where I worked with elders in Talad as well, from around the world, and I apprenticed with a South African Zulu healer by the name of Usamazulu Credo Mutwa. And so I shut down my law practice, spent about 7 years doing this work, healing myself. That was my own personal movement into wholeness. And then I came back to this country, and I couldn't find a job. After I got my PhD, I couldn't find a job doing this wonderful healing work. At least not a job that would compensate me. So kicking and screaming, I ended up going back into the practice of law again. I wasn't a happy camper, you know. However, it's a good thing I did because as a lawyer, I was invited by a group of lawyers to attend a conference in Seattle, Washington. And at this conference, I learned about this thing called restorative justice. I heard about restorative justice from a district attorney from Austin, Texas. He was a district attorney for Travis County. And even though the ultra-right had targeted him a number of times for defeat, he kept winning his elections because he was using restorative justice. And it was resulting in reduced violence. It was resulting in less crime in the Travis County. So when I learned about this justice that seeks to heal harm rather than add to harm, when I learned about this justice that seeks to create more peace in the world instead of deepening social conflict, when I learned, as Dr. King might say, of this justice that is love correcting that which revolts against love, I had an epiphany. For the first time, I could be the warrior, I could be the lawyer, and the healer. I could be all of these things at once. I felt whole. So from that moment on, I sought out all of the literature on restorative justice that I could. I found the leaders of the movement. I went to conferences in this country as well as in Latin America and in Africa and in other places. I devoured all the information that I could about restorative justice and actually planned to go back to Africa to do this healing work, this reconciliation work. I actually did some scouting trips, went to South Africa, and talked to then President Mbeki at the time, And he says, oh yes, you must come. We need this work. People are knocking down our doors to learn about it. Come. But did he offer a job? No. So, again, oh, I want to go to Africa. What, why can't I go to Africa to do this work? And then a friend said to me, Fania, Africa, or Oakland is Darfur. Oakland is those war-torn regions of Africa. And if you do this work in Oakland with success, the whole world will take notice. And so I had another epiphany. And it just sort of reminds me of the old teaching that, you need not travel across the globe to find your life's work. That drop your bucket where you stand. You will find the work that you are destined to do wherever you are. So that's what I did. We got together and with some people, my law students and others, and we did trainings in restorative justice. We brought the premier trainers in restorative justice and did some trainings here. And then we had some meetings in the city hall chambers with City Council member Nancy Nadell, who was a co-founder of Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. She brought in judges, and she brought in the head of the Department of Human Services, and other systems folks, and we brought in community folk and students. And in, I think, the spring of 2005, we founded Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. And our mission is to promote restorative justice principles and practices, policies and practices, systems change and practices, in schools, in the justice system, and in the community. So we've been doing that now for just about 10 years, with a lot of challenges and a lot of successes. And I'll tell you about those in a moment. Let's just talk a little bit about restorative justice. How many of you have taken a class or training in restorative justice? Oh, wonderful, wonderful. How many of you do restorative justice at your schools? Wow, awesome. Wow. And how many of you have read an article about restorative justice? This is great. It's unusual. With audiences that I speak to, you don't find this many people, who are doing restorative justice, who've taken classes